If there's one thing we've learned about business and life, it's that people are the X factor. They constantly surprise us, both in amazing ways and not so much. We're Ben and Syya, and welcome to the Gnaw on This Business Bites podcast. This show is all about real life things we all deal with every day, how they relate to business, and how to make some sense out of our daily chaos. Welcome to the show. And welcome back to another episode of Gnaw on This Business Bites. I'm Ben, and this is Syya. So, have you ever been in those situations of those awkward silence where all of a sudden you've said something and the room goes absolutely silent? The trick is, are you listening through that silence to find out exactly by saying nothing, what are people saying? People do not just speak with their tongues. People that are deaf don't just speak with their hands. There is 1,000 different ways that we communicate that most of us don't even realize that we are communicating. We live in a world where we have 5 senses. We have different ways of visualizing how people are feeling, what they're emoting, what their sense of frustration is, what their sense of happiness is, whether they're confused, whether they're on board, whether they're leaning in, whether they're leaning out, whether their arms are crossed, whether their brows are furrowed. And we need to be looking at all of these as clues to have an idea of what's really going on in the room. Because if we just rely on what people are saying and not look about what's going on in the room, we're going to be in real trouble. I got a great story for this. Years and years and years ago, I handled a $100 million account. And I was in the room with the purchaser, and we had a vendor on speakerphone. And if I hadn't been in the room, I wouldn't have realized it. This guy was on the room, and he had his feet up on the table. He had his arms back. He was doing the yeah. He had no respect for this vendor whatsoever. And unless you were looking at this, you hadn't a clue. Because his voice sounded like he was engaged. It sounded like he was on board. It sounded like he was buying into the situation in terms of tonality and what he was saying. But if you looked at his hand signals and his eyebrows and his feet up on the table and his condescending looks, you knew this project wasn't going anywhere. So we need to be cognizant beyond people's verbal cues and take a look at how people engage with us in 5 senses to truly understand, are we aligned? Are we misaligned? Do we belong? Do we not belong? Are we moving forward? Are we moving backwards? Syya, let's know on this.
My friend, for a second, I thought you were were we in the same meeting? Because I have dealt, as I was the vendor in that story, and that I
Uh,
have dealt with a lot of purchasing people in my time. Um, so let me preface it when I say this. I've learned, and maybe it's a skill you learn in sales, is to read body language, because you
yes.
have to know what the buying tells are, right? The signals, if you're going down the right path. Or at least the most successful sales reps I know are amazing body language readers. They might not know it, but they just intuit it and they catch on, right? One of the most powerful things you could do in negotiation at any stage is just shut up. Keep your mouth closed and just smile and nod and look at all the stakeholders, know what role they play in the decision making, and what phase they hold weight across the process, because the final person that signs the check may not necessarily be part of the other portion of it to get to that last point.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, let's just say I have been in a lot of negotiation rooms, tense as AF, and it's almost like the first person to speak breaks.
They're
And
usually
then
the ones that lose.
and then because I'm cracking myself up because of my ADD brain, I cut to the chase of the scene of like the good, bad, and ugly where all their eyes are darting and they're all looking at each other.
Hmm.
You know, Th- but that is such a critical part to really know where you're at because yes, you're right. Words mean nothing. Actions speak louder than words. And unless it's in writing, my friend, ain't nothing guaranteed. So you better know, I hate to say it, you better know who you're working with and understand where you're at in order to know where your next steps are going to be. So yeah, keep that
Well,
stinking mouth shut.
wasn't it Simon Sinek that said leaders speak last? I believe
I'm sure.
I'll have to look it up and check that out. But I believe it was Simon Sinek that said leaders speak last. And what he means by that is the true leaders in the room don't tell what they're thinking. They go into a room and they ask a question and then they shut up. And then they sit there and listen to what every other person in the room think about it. And then they let the people know. It says, well, you know what? This is what we're doing. This is why I've listened to all your opinions. You're right. You're right. You're right. I get this point, but let me tell you why I'm disagreeing with it, whatever, and be able to sit there and let every other person feel that they've been listened to, understood, and valued. And then they make the decision of what's going to happen moving forward. Because if you're the leader and you speak first, in a lot of dynamic situations, all you're going to get is an echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
All you're
Oh,
going to get is
you're not.
people that are going to sit there and, yes, boss, I agree with you, boss. That's
Yep.
great. Let me accentuate your idea, boss.
Yep.
And you're never going to hear that, well, that's a horseshit solution.
Exactly.
And yeah, and I think a lot of leaders really want to hear that, but they don't set that up to be able to be, to be successful. And somebody may not say it, but there might be somebody in the back of the room that is saying nothing, that's saying absolute nothing. They're writing things down. They're looking at people. They've got a look at disdain in their eye. And you, as a leader, need to sit there and say, Mary, you've been awfully quiet about this. This is, I believe you probably have a good opinion about this. There's something that we may not be seeing. What is it? And let them speak and don't interrupt them. And I think that we need to be better at keeping our yap shut and letting other people lead the conversation and put yourself in a position where all of a sudden you can gather that information, whether that information is what people say or what people don't say.
It's more like what they don't say more than you realize, right?
Hmm.
It's funny you should mention that. There was one time I was not pleased with the individual on the call, and I just wasn't having it. The individual was trying to take advantage of my colleagues, and this is not my sales role. This is like my current life.
Hmm.
And these two individuals thought they could outsmart us, if you want to talk, like, if I could share that. And I, you know me, if I can speak, I'm going to say something, right? And I just went quiet. I was like, I'm not having these guys. I was so disinterested. And it was interesting because these individuals thought they could bully us into a negotiation on something.
Hmm.
And I didn't say what they did all the talking. And they were condescending AF. And I was quiet. And then I could tell my colleagues were like, why is she being quiet? Why is she not speaking? And at one point, I got a DM. They're like, "Can you say something?" And I'm like, "Not yet." And I could tell they just, let's just say the bulldog Syya came out, and it was funny
Hmm.
because when I finally did speak, it was like we shut those guys down so hard. So anyway, yeah, no, it was. You're just chickling me on that memory of it because that has also happened on the flip side where I'm speaking and I got my you know what shut down real fast too, you know? So yeah, I mean, God, it's just, it's such a, but you learn very quickly, like, oh, I got shut down because I didn't listen. What a freaking
Right.
hard lesson it is, but everyone's going to go through it. And there's nothing, I think we talked about being vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's okay to be like, yep, I got my ass shut down just now.
But the question
Whoops.
is, what did you learn by getting your ass shut down? I mean,
And I
here's
act,
the thing.
yeah,
We all need to sit there and say, yep, that didn't go the way that I wanted it to. Okay, what happened? Why did it happen?
yeah,
How do I be smarter next time?
yeah.
And I don't care if you are leading the situation or you're brand new to the corporation or whatever, we're all going to make mistakes. Every once in a while, we're all going to get shot down. If you're not getting shut down, you're not coming up with innovative ideas. You're
You're
not.
not trying hard. I'm kidding.
You are not trying hard enough. You are not, you are not stepping outside your comfort zone. You are not breaking the box. You are sitting there being a yes person. Quite honestly, how many yes people do we need within an organization? Not that many.
Mm-mm.
And
No.
I think that we need to sit there and say, okay, what went right? What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? And how do we do it better next time? And I think none of us, because of that vulnerability, need to be none of us should be afraid to step up and say what we mean, whether it's verbally or non-verbally. But a good leader should be able to see both, and a good leader is going to get the people that are not being verbal to be verbal, and that's good leadership. And
Yeah.
I think as a leader, you need to be able to do that. You need to be cognizant of who's not talking in the room, and those are the people that actually need to be listened to in one way, shape, or form. And some of those people you're going to take out of the room, and you're going to say, "Hey, listen, I noticed you weren't saying anything in the room. What was going on in your mind?" And some a good leader may not ask for their opinion in public, but they're going to get it one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And we need to realize that some people don't want to be part of, don't want to speak in public and are comfortable speaking in public, but their opinion still matters. And it's finding a way to bring people out and to elevate people so they do start being more comfortable speaking in public. Because we all started at a place where we were young and naive and didn't know and didn't want to look stupid and didn't want to make waves because we were afraid for our jobs.
Yep.
And we never should be, but that's reality. So I think that we need to, as leaders, realize that and say some people need to say, oh, okay, Mary, John, and Brian, I need to come back to them sometime later today on an individual basis and have a conversation with them or send them an email or whatever and get their opinion. Okay, so noted. Because everybody has an opinion. You may not want to hear it. You may not like what they have to say. It may frustrate you, but 9 times out of 10, it will probably make the idea better by knowing what that snafu is that you haven't even been cognizant of because you're not looking at it the same way you are. Ops is going to look at things differently than legal is, that marketing is, that sales is, that customer experience is, to whatever. Each department is going to look at a problem slightly differently based on what their biases, reality, and budgetary understandings are. So we need to be cognizant of that. And we need to be watching what people say and what they don't say.
100%. Can't disagree on that, man. Because look, you're going to find out very quickly, okay, what they do and don't say, what they really mean very quickly, because you're not going to get the results you want. Right.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, no, I think silence speaks volumes. I think there is power in that. And I think it is a skill. I don't think that's an intuitive thing. So I do think people need to practice it. I definitely need to
Mhm.
practice it. I freaking still need to practice it. Very aware. But it's funny. It is again, experience goes to the old people's, you know, you have experience behind you to remind yourself, shut up. You know what I mean? Whereas when you're enthusiastic as a youngin, you're like, I need to share with the world. Let me vomit all my ideas. So yeah, I mean, If anyone's listening, tell us your story because I'm still struggling with it. I don't know about you, Ben. I am struggling. So yeah, that's all I got. That's all I got to say about that.
Hey, it's a lifetime experience, and that's all I have to say is we get better the more we do it. So
Yeah.
let's leave it there. I'm Ben,
I'm Syya.
and we'll see you soon.
This is me going silent. Hey, hey, hey. Thanks for listening to another episode of Not On This Business Bites. If you liked what you heard, we most humbly ask that you like, share, and hit that subscribe button. If you want to communicate more effectively within your organization, contact Ben at IamBenBaker.com or me at BrilliantBeeMedia.com. We can help you build your community, brand awareness, and personality through digital content and podcasting. We cannot wait to hear from you. See you next week for another episode of Not On This Business Bites.